On the China-North Korea border, above the Yalu River, stands a stone taller than a two-story house, 6.4 meters, 37 tons, nearly 1,800 characters. Most ancient kingdoms survive only in the words of their enemies. This one wrote its own story in stone for a king who took an almost erased kingdom and made it master of Northeast Asia. And one damaged sentence on it has kept 3 nations arguing for over a century. You know the kingdom, Goguryeo. Last episode it hit the floor. A capital burned, a dead king dug from his tomb in 342. A king killed on his own walls in 371. It answered with a faith, a school, a code of law, and rebuilt itself into a machine. In 391 the machine, and a ledger of unpaid debts, passed to a king of about 18. How does a kingdom that was almost erased come to command Northeast Asia, and what does the summit cost? His name was Damdeok, son of the brother who followed Soserum, grandson of the king who fell at Pyongyang. He inherited everything Episode 3 built, a trained army, literate officials, one law, one faith. What he did with it earned him the name history uses, Gwanggaeto, broad expander of territory. Royal titles usually flatter. His reads like an understatement. His first act was not a battle. It was a declaration. He proclaimed his own era name, Yeongnak, eternal rejoicing, the earliest recorded in Korean history, and took the title Taewang, supreme king. Dating time by your own reign was an emperor's privilege. Keeping his own calendar told every court on the continent, I am no one's junior. Every conquest that followed would be dated by it. Now the board, south, Baekje, the blood enemy that killed his grandfather, west, later Yan, heirs of the Murong-Xianbei clan whose soldiers once dug up a Goguryeo king, southeast, Silla, small and struggling, on the south coast, the Gaya states, across the strait, the seafaring polities of the Japanese archipelago, raiders and allies in the peninsula's wars. 5 directions, he moved on nearly all of them. First, the oldest debt. In 392, barely a year on the throne, he struck Baekje and took 10 walled cities by the chronicles count. Then wheeled northwest and broke the Khitan on the Liao frontier. Baekje counterattacked for 3 years. Every attack was thrown back. Then in 396 he went for the throat. Yeongnak year 6, Gwanggaeto came at Baekje by land and sea at once, driving into the Han River heartland. To the walls of the capital itself, near modern Seoul, the stele counts 58 fortresses and 700 villages taken. King Asen submitted, hostages, tribute and an oath carved into the stone, to be Goguryeo's subject forever. 25 years after Baekje killed a Goguryeo king, that king's grandson took its king's surrender. The first debt, 371 paid, but Baekje bent without breaking. Shut out in the north, it aligned with the Gaya states, and with the Wa. In 399 Wa forces overran Silla and Silla's king appealed north. In the stele's words, the men of Wa had filled his land. Goguryeo owed Silla nothing. Gwanggaeto's answer would redraw the peninsula's future. In 400 he sent 50,000 men south. The stele's own figure. The relief force smashed the coalition, drove it out of Silla, and hunted it into the Gaya lands to a surrender in the far south. 1 campaign, 3 consequences. Silla was saved, and became in effect a Goguryeo protectorate. Gaya, the Confederacy's lead state, never recovered, and a second Wa landing in 404 was crushed on the southern frontier. While his armies were south, the west struck. Later Yan hit the frontier in 400. The Murong again, the clan of the tomb robbers of 342. From 402 he counterattacked, broke Yan's assaults, and secured Liaodong, land tied to the old Gojoseon world of our first episode. 60 years earlier Goguryeo had knelt to the Murong, now it held their frontier. The debt of 342 paid. Finish the compass. Northeast 398, the Sushan forest peoples submit. North 410, eastern Buyo, by legend the homeland Goguryeo's founder once fled. Absorbed, the stele totals the life's work, 64 walled cities, 1,400 villages, its own celebratory count. Beneath the count the map is real, most of Manchuria, the peninsula's northern 2/3. The largest realm in Korean history built in 20 years by a man who never reached 40. Because around 412, not yet 40 by every account, Gwanggaeto died. Not in battle. Illness. Here's where empires usually break. One in one lifetime carved up in the next. The map passed to a son of about 18, his father's age at his own crowning. History calls him Jangsu, the long-lived. Rarely has a name been better earned. The son's first act was not conquest either. It was memory. In 414, beside his father's tomb, Jangsu raised the stone we opened on, a single pillar, the largest engraved stele in East Asia. It carries the dynasty's founding legend. Jumong the Archer Prince, told as sacred origin story. It lists the campaigns year by Yeongnak year. It assigns 330 households to guard the tomb forever. A son carved his father into permanence and gave Goguryeo its own voice. One line of that voice is wounded. A damaged passage dated 391 mentions the Wa crossing the sea. Key characters are gone, and the grammar leaves its subject unnamed. In the colonial era, a Japanese reading casts the Wa as conquerors in southern Korea, feeding a theory of ancient Japanese rule there that mainstream scholarship has since set aside. Many scholars today read the line as they read the whole monument, Goguryeo's victory record, where the Wa appear as raiders Goguryeo defeats. But no reading can be proven. 30 worn characters, 140 years of argument. His second act moved more than any battle. In 427, Jangsu moved the capital itself, out of the mountain city on the Yalu, south to Pyongyang, today the capital of North Korea. Pyongyang was the ground reclaimed from the last foreign colony in 313, the very walls where his great-grandfather fell in 371. The move broke the old northern aristocracy's grip, sat the throne on rich plains and sea lanes, and turned the whole kingdom like a compass needle south. The south understood instantly. In 433, Baekje and Silla, rivals with every reason to distrust each other, signed an alliance against Goguryeo. Remember that pact. It would hold in one form or another for over a century. The single biggest reason Goguryeo never swallowed the peninsula whole. Empire is not only one, it is balanced. China was split, Northern Wei in the north, rival dynasties in the south, and on the steppe, the Roran, Jangsu kept them all engaged and none in charge. Embassies to Wei, 800 horses to the southern court, an understanding with the steppe. When a crushed border kingdom's last ruler fled to him, Jangsu sheltered him in Wei's face, then when the guest conspired, executed him. Tribute and titles were the era's diplomatic grammar, not submission. Jangsu answered to no one. Baekje's king, Gaya, watched the shadow lengthen. In 472 he wrote to northern Wei, pleading for a joint attack on Goguryeo. Wei refused, unwilling to provoke the stronger power. The letter only told Jangsu what Baekje intended. What happened next, Korea's oldest chronicle, written centuries later, tells as a warning tale. A Goguryeo monk named Doram, planted as a spy, befriended Gaya over the board game Baduk and coaxed him into treasury-draining building projects. A story and flagged as one. But when the storm came, Baekje's defenses were hollow. In 475, Jangsu, reportedly in his 80s, led 30,000 men across the Han. Hanseong, Baekje's capital of nearly 5 centuries, fell in about 7 days by the traditional account. King Gaya fled, was captured by 2 of his own former subjects, the chronicle says, and executed at a fortress on Aka Mountain. Baekje's relief, 10,000 Silla troops, arrived too late. The surviving court fled far south. 104 years after Baekje killed a king of Goguryeo, Goguryeo returned the sentence and took the Han Valley, the heart of the peninsula. This is the summit. From the Manchurian steppe to a frontier deep below the Han River, Goguryeo at its greatest extent. The mood at the top survives. Near Cheongju, in central South Korea, a 2-meter stone unearthed in 1979, the only Goguryeo stele ever found on the peninsula, calls the king of Silla Goguryeo's younger brother, an empire so secure it wrote family rank onto its neighbors. Jangsu died in 491, at about 97, after some 79 years on the throne, the longest documented reign in East Asian history. He took power before the western half of Rome fell, and ruled long after it was gone. Between the father's crowning and the son's death, 100 years, almost to the year, Goguryeo's golden age. Now the ledger's other column. Every conquest had purchased an enemy. The drive south welded Baekje and Silla together, and their alliance outlived Jangsu. Silla, the client saved in 400, was already slipping out of orbit, growing strong inside Goguryeo's shadow. Within about 60 years, the southern kingdoms would claw back the Han Valley together, and the empire now stretched along a continental frontier facing whoever ruled China next. Summits are like that. Every road leads down. One more legacy hides in plain sight. By tradition, it was in Jangsu's era that the kingdom shortened its name. Goguryeo became Goryeo. Centuries later, a new Korean dynasty revived it, and from that name the world took the word it still uses, Korea. The dating is debated, but if the tradition holds, every time you say Korea, you speak the Golden Age's name. Go back to the riverbank. The empire is gone. The dynasties that fought it, courted it, mourned it, gone, but the stone a son raised for his father in 414 still stands where Goguryeo planted it, on a border between two countries that both tell its story. 16 centuries of reign, war, and argument, and it has not moved, defeated and then rebuilt. Our refrain since episode 1, this is what the rebuilding was for. A kingdom almost erased twice, wrote itself into the world's memory in its own words. The stone is silent about one last turn. Goguryeo's century at the top rested on a divided China. A century on, China united under the sway, and the Colossus looked east. An invasion, the records counted 1 million men. A general who drowned an army at a river called the Salsa. A fortress named Ansi that stopped an emperor. A dictator named Yin Gaesaman. Goguryeo beat back 2 empires, and then in 668 it fell. Not first to armies, to something inside. That story is episode 5 of Untold Korea. Subscribe and meet us at the river.